If you're familiar with the films of Wes Anderson, whether it be The Royal Tenenbaums, The Grand Budapest Hotel, or The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou, you'd probably agree that the best way to describe them is as a quirky cult classic that you either get or you don't, which is why it's appropriate that Bill Murray's character in The Life Aquatic is often seen wearing a Vostok Amphibia, a watch that can also be described as a quirky cult classic that you either get or you don't. If you're watching this, there's a good chance you already know a lot about Vostok. But I have to give some background information for the folks that don't. And I just want to throw this out there right now. It's inevitable that I'm going to be mispronouncing something, so I apologize in advance. One could easily make a whole video about Vostok and the history of the design of the Amphibia. But I'm just going to hit on the highlights here for the sake of time. Now, Vostok's a Russian manufacturer that's been around since 1942. In the mid-60s, they were chosen to supply watches for the Soviet military. In the process, they created two designs that are well known today. The first one is a field watch known as the Komandirsky, and the second is this, the Amphibia Dive Watch. During its development, the goal was to create a watch that could survive depths of 200 meters. Something the Swiss had already accomplished. The simplest solution would have been to copy one of the Swiss designs. In researching this, I found two different stories as to why they just didn't simply copy the Swiss designs, both of which seem plausible to me, but I'm not sure which exactly is the truth. The first is that they simply didn't want to pay for the patent rights to use the technology, and the second was that they didn't think their equipment could operate with such precision that was required. So a new design was necessary, and one was created in typical Russian fashion. While the end result may seem less refined than some of its Swiss counterparts, there is no mistaking that it was intelligently designed to be effective, tough, easy to build, and easy to maintain. I won't go into all the details, but I will say that the keys to the Amphibia's design lie in its crystal and its caseback. Instead of making an extremely rugged watch that can survive the pressures, they made a smarter watch that utilized the pressure to help seal itself more effectively. Now that's enough history. Let's get to the watch itself. Let's do something different and start with the metal bracelet. Mostly because I took one look at it and immediately took it off. I didn't even want to try it on. It's thin, lightweight, sharp, and one of the worst clasps I've ever seen. So the first thing I did was to take the bracelet off and put the first NATO strap I could find on it. Now, one of the things I wanted to mention about the Amphibias is when you start looking at them that there are a lot of combinations of different cases, bezels, and dials. But as long as it says it's an Amphibia Classic, it's all the same watch, which also makes it interesting because all those different parts are interchangeable, which makes it very easy to mod and customize your own. Now, this is a polished stainless steel case, and it's officially case type 420, which is one of the slimmer Amphibia cases, sitting around 39 millimeters, while most of the others sit around 41. On this particular case, there isn't much case to be seen. You primarily see and focus on the bezel and the crown. In fact, it sort of has a porthole look to it. The finishing is okay. It's nicely polished, although the edges of the bottom of the lugs are a little sharp, but they are a 90-degree angle. One thing I want to note on this particular watch was that there were a couple of very fine scratches on the side of the case. Nothing major, and it should easily be polished out. But this does highlight one of the problems when buying a Vostok. They are shipped directly from Russia and the Ukraine, and can take 30 to 90 days to get here in the United States. So if you do have a problem, sending it back is not as simple as sending something back to Amazon. On top of the case is a metal bezel, which I believe is made of brass with a chrome coating. It's bidirectional, and there's no ratchet-type click locking system to keep it in place. From what I've seen, it's basically held on in place by a wire to provide tension. The upside is it makes changing it out and customizing it extremely easy. Before we get to the dial, let's talk about the crystal. It's a domed crystal, specifically a hardened lucite that is manufactured to very strict precision. I like this dial for two reasons. One, I just love the look of a domed crystal. The second is that it's part of the intelligent design of the watch. At high pressure, the crystal will start to flatten, which will widen its base and help to seal itself in the process. And now the dial. As I said earlier, Vostok has a lot of dial designs, some of which are a little over-the-top military themed. A popular choice among the amphibias are what is known as the Scuba Dudes, and they come in a lot of colors, with blue being a very popular one. This one, however, is a black dial with an orange Scuba Dude. To me, the overall dial design is reminiscent of the Seiko SNKs. In fact, the Amphibia in a lot of ways reminds me of a cross between a more traditional dive watch and a field watch. But as I was saying, the dial is black, with white loom dots and white Arabic numbers for the hour indicators. The chapter ring is then further divided by orange slashes for minute markers. At the 6 o'clock position is the date. The text is in black with a white background. It's a little small but does the job. The hour and minute hands are metal with white loom, the hour hand being a very large arrow, and the second hand in red with a white loom dot. I really do like the hour arrow, but the second hand is a little short for my taste. Complementing the black dial is the orange Scuba Dude, followed by Russian text also in orange, which, if I had to guess, says something about 200 meter water resistance and 31 joule movement. When I first saw the black dial on this Amphibia, I was actually very unimpressed at first. It was indoors and it just looked kind of dull. But then I took it outside and saw it in the sunlight, and I saw it in a whole new light. The dial paint seems to have metal flakes in it, such that the flakes really shine and reflect in sunlight, which really helps the orange Scuba Dude and the orange minute markers really pop on that black background. While I originally thought the dial was dull, it has easily become my favorite part of the Amphibia. So onto the crown, which is a screw-down type at the 3 o'clock position. Before buying this, I had seen videos that described the wobbly crown a Vostok has, so I sorta knew what to expect, but it is still a little strange when I got to use it. So if you're unfamiliar, this is what I'm talking about. The crown is partially detached from the watch, such that it wobbles a little when you unscrew it. And in order to engage it, such as winding it or setting the time, you have to pull it out just slightly when you turn it. If you were unfamiliar with it and you got this watch, you probably would think something was wrong with it, but it really is a design feature of it. So, as I said, the watch is windable, but it is not hackable. But the big disappointment is that the date is not quick set. So there's no first or second position to set the date itself. You set the date by advancing the hour past midnight, which is a little annoying, but the date change is very nice and instantaneous. And now the case back, which there are two things you should notice about it. One, it's a brushed stainless steel with a finishing that's a little more rougher than the rest of the watch. The second is that it does not have the typical screw-down case back. Instead, the case back itself sits inside the case, where the edge rests on a large rubber gasket. Then, a metal ring is screwed down around the exterior of the case back, pushing it into this case and the flat gasket. With increased water pressure, there is an increased pressure on the case back into that large flat gasket, which therefore increases the surface area and then improves the efficiency of its sealing. So here are the dimensions for the 420 case. It's 39 millimeters wide without the crown, 43.5 width. Lug to lug is 46, and that dome crystal, it's a bit thick at 15 millimeters. The strap width on this particular case is 18 millimeters. Wearing it is not bad. It's better than I thought, or at least better with the NATO strap on it. The longer lugs give it a good stability and it never seems to move. Looking at the watch, you predominantly see the bezel and the dial, and not much case, which could be different depending on what you normally wear. My only real complaint is that it is rather tall, and I do have a concern about whacking it into things as I walk around. Let's talk about accuracy. It's okay. Just okay. It runs about 16 seconds fast a day, which is on par with a lot of the Seikos. I wish it was a little bit better, but it is what it is. Although it shouldn't be too hard to open up and try to regulate. Lastly, let's talk about Loom. The Loom is not bad. It's okay. From my own experience, it seems to get fully charged a lot quicker than other types of Loom, specifically Seikos. But it's not as bright at fully charged as other dive watches. I'd say it's about on par with a Seiko SNK. But the Loom does not seem to last as long as a Seiko SNK does. Now, I was initially hesitant to order a Vostok online. I knew it would take forever to get here, and it did take almost 2 months. I was also concerned about some possible quality control issues, as well as ordering from random dudes in a foreign country. At the time, I didn't know anything about Marinome, which I think I'm pronouncing properly. I'll throw a link down below as they are a well-known, reputable Vostok dealer online. But I found the Orange Scuba Dude on eBay, and I realized I didn't have anything quite like it. And when I saw it, there was a promotional coupon going on for eBay, which brought the price down even further. So I couldn't resist. Now, to be honest, when I first opened up the watch, I was a bit disappointed. The bracelet simply sucked, so I immediately changed that. I set the time and found the wobbly crown to be a little odd. Setting the date was a little annoying, mostly because I think it was the 7th and the watch was set at the 10th, so I had to go back and forth multiple times. And I wasn't completely sold on the porthole case, as I'll call it. But then I put it on. And then I went outside to charge up the Loom. And for the first time, I saw that domed crystal play with the light. And I saw all the little metal flakes on that black dial reflect back. And I noticed how the orange on that black background just kind of pops out. And I was taken aback. Then I went inside and placed the Amphibia down next to another dive watch, an Invicta Pro Diver, which is a Submariner homage. Looking at the two side by side, I realized how much the Submariner has influenced modern dive watches, and how the Amphibia really has its own distinct design. And just like that, I thought to myself, okay, I get it now. Everyone and their mother has a subby homage. This is something different. It's a watch that diverted from the evolutionary path of most other dive watches and kind of went on its own way. The next thing I know, I'm sitting down and ordering a strap to match it, as well as looking at different bezels and other ways to customize it. I've worn it most days since then, and I honestly smile every time I look at it. So it's safe to say that I now get the appeal, and have quickly fallen for this quirky cult watch. Now, back in Soviet Russia, your choices of dive watches were much more limited. So we really have to look at the Vostok with modern eyes. They usually run about $50 to $75 with shipping. So while I have come to appreciate its quirkiness, it is definitely not a watch for everyone. If you're looking for a Russian watch to complete your collection, and you're expecting more of a Submariner homage, or if you're just looking for a cheaper alternative to an SKX, then this is definitely not your watch, and you will be disappointed. The appeal of the Amphibia is kind of hard to explain. If you've ever had a friend who loves old Volkswagens, and they try to explain to you why they love their old Volkswagens while you look at them like they're completely crazy, explaining a Vostok is kind of like that. For me, I appreciate it for what it is, and less about what it isn't. It's something different, a throwback to another era. It's quirky, but the quirks have functional purpose, and it's a great example of Soviet engineering philosophy. A design that intelligently overcomes a very specific problem, with a focus on being cheap, rugged, and easy to mass produce. It's designed to be a tool, with less regard for refinement. So if you can appreciate that aspect of it, as well as the unique design history, then a Vostok Amphibia is probably for you. But if you can't, then you probably have the same look on your face that I do when my friend is fixing his VW Beetle once again. In which case, don't worry about it. There are plenty of other dive watches in the sea. Now, if you do want one, just be prepared for it to take a while. And while you can get some better deals on eBay, that comes with the usual risks of eBay as well. Otherwise, Marinam is probably the safer, easier way. If nothing else, they have a great website that you can look at all the different designs. One final word of warning. It is not unheard of for one Vostok to become multiple Vostoks, or since they're so easy to customize, that you spend more modifying one out than it costs to buy it in the first place. They have been known to become addicting. Thanks for watching. If you have any experience with Vostok, or any specific seller to recommend, please leave a comment. And as always, like, comment, and subscribe.